Welcome to Thriving in the Age of Disruption with Dr. Ramesh. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Ramesh meets with Chrystie Dao, an inspiring entrepreneur and venture builder with a rich multicultural background. Chrystie shares her compelling story from fleeing Vietnam as a refugee child to carving out a successful international career in banking and tech entrepreneurship. Striving in different cities from Sydney, London to Singapore, and ultimately back to her ancestral home of Hanoi, Chrystie shares her early life challenges such as dealing with racism and adapting to new environments, which built resilience and shaped her entrepreneurial mindset. Chrystie now plays a pivotal role in Vietnam's startup ecosystem, focusing on venture building, social impact, and sustainability. Additionally, she shares her practices of meditation and mindfulness, which help her manage crisis and maintain balance. This groundedness brings to life her commitment and vision to contribute to her country's striving startup ecosystem and build a brighter future for the Vietnamese people.
Chrystie, welcome to the Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast series. Tell us a little bit about what you do in life and your journey.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for having me on the podcast. The best way to describe me: made in Saigon, assembled in Sydney, improved in London, commercialized in Singapore, and now repackaged in Hanoi. So that kind of sums up my journey in life. I was a child of refugee parents. My parents left Vietnam on a boat with me in tow and my older brother when we were quite young. So we sailed the open seas and landed in Indonesia, an island of Indonesia, very close to Singapore, where I've been living for the last 8 years, as you know. We finally resettled in Australia. Grew up in Sydney. I was educated there and embarked on a banking career, international banking career, which took me to London. Spent a lot of time in Europe as well. So I worked in many cities in Europe. Came back to Sydney for a few years. Need to move and learn and spread my wings. So I ended up in Singapore in 2016. And that's where I started my entrepreneurship journey. February 2023, I found myself moving back to Hanoi, and that was a very spiritual calling from my ancestors to come back, contribute to the thriving startup ecosystem in Vietnam. This is where I met you, so that's pretty much my journey in a nutshell.
We've heard about Vietnam's past and people who had to move out during the troubled times. And how was it for you to grow up outside of Vietnam and Sydney?
I was pretty young when I left, so I have sketchy memories of my childhood. Sometimes I have these flashbacks of my escape on the boat. We had 3 tries and we finally succeeded. On the 3rd go, I started primary school in Australia, and as very first few in those days, Australia was a very white culture, very white country. And so Asians were quite foreign. But I think the first wave of Vietnamese were in the late 70s and 80s. Very few Vietnamese kids at school in Australia. I grew up in Sydney. I experienced a lot of racism at a very young age, but didn't know what racism was. You kind of was treated a bit differently and you were called different names. I guess that's where I built thick skin and resilience, get used to the fact that I was different and accepted my difference because I wasn't white, I wasn't blonde, I wasn't blue-eyed. So that kind of made me a little bit stronger later in life. So I was always different, which made me to believe that to be different is fine and to accept being different.
Excellent. So thank you for sharing your story. I was born in Sri Lanka and my parents left in the early 70s for Singapore to give us a better opportunity because of their internal turmoil. As a 6-year-old, flying to Singapore was difficult because I had all these attachments to the extended family, and it took a while for me to let go of that upset. What I wanted to talk about was the entrepreneurial mindset. And you're someone who spent enough time in the corporate world, as well as being an entrepreneur. And now you're involved with a venture fund. Someone who has an entrepreneurial mindset is resourceful. That means you bump up against a problem, you're able to define what the problem is, and you look at getting the problem sorted out. Number 2 is that you're effective in dealing with uncertainty and in managing risk. And lastly, you're someone who is able to create value, both financial and non-financial value, not just for yourself, but also for everyone else. Let's hear a little bit about your own entrepreneurial journey and how this mindset has supported you in your journey.
Sure. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So my parents were very entrepreneurial people and had multiple businesses in Australia when I was growing up. But interestingly, my father was very entrepreneurial. He started the first English school in Saigon back in 1970. And this was on the back of his great interest after learning English because of the Americans. A lot of Americans were stationed in Vietnam. So my dad had a very thriving business, which is English school. So when my parents moved to Australia, they had multiple businesses. The first being a bakery, a banh mi shop, and that was in mid 1980s. And it was the first Vietnamese bakery. And I still remember the shop's name called the French Hot Bread Shop. So I, as a young child, I was forced to help my parents work on the weekends serving customers. They opened another bakery, and then they moved on to have other businesses such as in real estate, where you can go and buy lotto. Having worked many of my parents' businesses kind of taught me to be quite entrepreneurial. I saw how they were dealing with things and saw my parents having to deal with many difficult situation because in the life of an entrepreneur, it's always ups and downs. And I saw them like they had to work really long hours, always worrying about finances, trying to grow the business and throwing everything they had into the business. I saw that growing up and I swore to myself that I would never be an entrepreneur because I saw how difficult it was. That kind of like shaped my career and chose a banking career where I felt that gave me a stable income, but it also allowed me to travel the world and see different countries. And so that's what I kind of set out my career to become. I lived in many cities, experienced amazing things as part of an over 20-year banking career. But I wanted to do something for myself, to be my own boss. Even as a banker, I remember like the way I dealt with my clients or within the organization, I was always looking outside the box in terms of my own team or my own products, always trying to forge alliances, trying to look at how I could provide more for my customers or more for my employer. I was always wanting to solve problems for my clients, looking beyond borders all the time. I was looking at how do I offer something much more valuable so that my customers will always choose me as ultimate provider.
That's the resourcefulness aspect of an entrepreneurial mindset. You've pointed, you can actually use that in a corporate setting as well.
Back to my story, I became an entrepreneur and built two companies. One was a fintech in Singapore, the other one was an AI technology company. I came to handle and build out my tech team, but I got more than what I bargained for, which was a calling, which I thought was much bigger than building a company. And that was really trying to come back, help contribute to the thriving startup ecosystem in Vietnam. So that led me to my current role, where I play as a venture builder at VSV Capital and VSV Foundation. At VSV Foundation, it's really around working with much more social impact startups and helping them build out the business, raise capital, and help them to scale and be successful in their ideas.
And what's a typical pain point for many of these social impact startups?
People have great ideas, but it's like, how do you actually make those ideas commercial? So it's looking at the business model. How can I scale? How do I build an ecosystem around me to support? How do I get investors? How do I get customers? How do I test that idea to see if it's really viable? And this is where my banking experience has really come home to roost, to leverage everything that I've learned, not just financial analysis element, but looking at businesses from a different perspective, and then my networks and connecting people. So I think in this world, it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know. right? And
That's
it's really
true.
about building that ecosystem, leveraging the connections, and then helping connecting people.
Excellent. Given your experience in the corporate world as well as now in startups ecosystem, what's your advice to young women?
I've always been a very ambitious and driven person. So I've always wanted to be the number one in everything that I did, right? In my career, in my job, I've surrounded myself with mentors. So very early on, I had both female and male mentors. I really believe in the power of the network. I used to do a lot of networking. It takes a lot of time out of your day. But for me, it was really important to build that ecosystem, to have the network whereby I could call on people where I need support. But it's having belief that I can do it. I know it's hard work, but it's having the confidence to move out of your comfort zone. And that's really how my journey of entrepreneurship came along, because all these years I was in a comfortable role, financially doing very well, but I really wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. I was put through many leadership programs, and then people used to say to me, "You're really good at this, that, and that." But then how do you test that you're very good? What is the litmus test to see how good you are? And that is really testing how good you are compared to yourself. So that's why I took the leap of faith and decided to go out my own to really test how resilient I am, to see what I'm really made of.
You've called about having mentors and having them early, whether it's male or female mentors. And the other point is power of network, and there's no shortcut to that because you've got to be out there building those relationships so that when you want to call on them, there is a real connection and people are willing to step forward and provide you with that support. But in the process of these two, you've also developed a belief in yourself, like a kind of confidence, so that you can step out and to take on something new. I describe crisis as a setback, and it sometimes can be a failure. And it's one of those moments where you either die or you move on. So our response to the crisis is really critical. And as an entrepreneur, we would be facing a lot of these setbacks on a daily basis. And you alluded to some of these as you were growing up with entrepreneurial parents who kept expanding their business and what they had to deal with in terms of the time component, as well as always having to manage the cash flow for expanding the business and managing the commitments they had. In your own personal life, how did you deal with crisis or setbacks? And what practices do you actually follow?
I think everybody, like any economic cycle, go through cycles, right? Ups and downs. I'd say to people, when my life changed from a corporate slave into entrepreneurship, it felt like a constant roller coaster ride. And it was always more downs than were up. I spent a lot of time questioning and introspection. I started to take on meditation. I thought that meditation was too slow for me because I always loved fast sport. I used to do kickboxing, boxing, anything was fast sport, martial arts. Therefore, I never used to focus on yoga or Pilates or meditation because I thought it was too slow for me. During times of crisis, I spend a lot of time introspection and look at mindfulness as a practice and meditation.
That's a great point. The ability to slow down, because in a crisis, if we can slow down our reaction, then we have the opportunity to breathe and to really sense what we need to do next, rather than just do an auto reaction, or worse still, get paralyzed and do nothing. So thank you for sharing those practices. And what sort of meditation do you do?
I now have a daily routine whereby as soon as I get up in the morning, I meditate for 15 to 20 minutes. And I practice what is called creative visualization. And I spend a lot of time going through my own guided meditation in my head. So I talk myself through all the things that I want the outcomes to be. Practice gratefulness, something that I've only recently adopted. It's just so funny way of granting you things, and it does it in its own universe timing. So I might want something so desperately, and doesn't mean I'll get it, right? Today, tomorrow, but it might come next year,
That's right.
But I've got to put it out there.
So the power of the creative visualization to be able to create your day and the outcomes that you would like to have, you can have a sense of fulfillment and control knowing that you've created that day. What I want to move on to is to talk a little bit about spirituality. Where are you in your spiritual journey?
So I believe I'm a very spiritual person. Always have been. I believe in God. I always believe in the universe. And I believe, as I mentioned, creative visualization and asking for things. And I learned that the universe doesn't give you what you want, it gives you who you are. So you've got to become that person and be ready to receive the gifts. And so that's what I've been recently discovering, because I used to always be very ambitious, want things instantly. I've learned that you don't always get what you want at the time that's convenient for you.
Yeah.
It will come, but it will come at a time when you least expect it.
That's really profound. I've never heard someone say it quite that way, but it sits really well. The universe gives you who you are so that you can get what you want versus what you want. So you have to become who you are to get that. And it's that transformation process to get to who you are that will bring those gifts of what you want. And do you think it's possible for us to live a simple life?
Simple, everybody's different, right? So
Yeah.
different, simple could mean different things to different people. So for me, the world's changed. There's a lot of consumerism and also instant gratification. People want things right now, right here. So for me, I believe that people can live a simple life, depends on what makes them happy. Looking back when I was growing up, I used to associate success with accumulating huge amounts of stuff like designer goods and labels, which personifies that I'm a successful person. Like if I wear a certain brand of watch or designer bag, then it shouts so successful in the world. But I could be so empty inside. So for me, it's no longer that. It's really about like I seek peace, tranquility, love, and just the simple things whereby happiness is so important to me. To achieve happiness, I have a great day, to do the things I love, which is why I come back to Vietnam, be part of this ecosystem, be a change catalyst, do the things that is much more meaningful.
So what was that moment that caused you to make that shift? Was there like one particular incident, or was it just part of the natural growth and evolution?
I think it's part of a growth phase as one goes through life. At one stage, we think like you have all these bags and then it all goes in the cupboard, nobody sees it. And then you look at people who are so much worse off than you, and then kids who live very simple lives. They just carefree. And it's like, well, that was my life when I was a person, when I landed in an island in Indonesia, 7 years old. We didn't have to go to school. It was the best thing ever. We stayed in UNHCR, but with the beach, we had everything was there, nature, right? But that was the best days of your life.
In some ways, it's like going back to the basics. And it came from within you, right? Because it's like that journey, like that spiritual awakening you talked about. And it probably came along with you moving out to Hanoi to be part of this entrepreneurial startup ecosystem. So do you have like a vision around what you want to accomplish, or you're just allowing yourself to be guided by where you can contribute and what you can do?
My vision and my mission is to be involved as a mentor, helping, or a venture builder, helping these social impact startups in Vietnam. So I'm really interested in looking at climate change initiatives, renewable energy, and circular economy. They're the three key focus pillars for me. Looking at how can we preserve this earth, right? Because I think we're all interconnected in some way. right? And we have to really look at how do we preserve this earth for future generations.
Sustainability, what's your definition of it?
Sustainability means two things. It means regeneration and it means preservation. Human race has depleted a lot of natural resources on Earth. If we don't do anything, option is not an option. We have to do something. So what do? We really need to look at, again, regeneration and preservation. And that's through looking at the Earth. What resources can we preserve? How do we scale that? How do we make more of that, of the same things? You look at how do we then all interconnect each other and make, for example, coffee. We look at coffee's foundation, right? So it's then used for chicken feed, right? And then the chicken can be used to looking at eco farming, right? How do we sustain that? How do we build all that stuff around that to then feed into another ecosystem, right? Because that's regeneration, that's preservation, right? So that's how I look at sustainability, trying to preserve what we have and build on that using technology.
We look at sustainability from the individual mindset first. We look at it as the ongoing thriving of a living system. And that for anyone or any corporate or any group to really sustain what you talked about in terms of regeneration and preservation, they've got to own it, that we are all part of this interrelated, interconnected world, and that we can have unintended consequences on each other if we are not conscious about that system view. I want to round off our formal part of the discussion by just asking you to use 3 words to describe thriving.
I think when someone's thriving, they're happy, right? They're fulfilled. So I would say happiness, fulfillment, and love, right? I mean, you have to have love to be thriving. You've got to love, I mean, not doesn't mean love someone, but love yourself, right?
Yes.
Be at peace with yourself and have the internal happiness.
Wow.
And then you thrive. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to ask you some quick questions. What's your favorite book?
Oh, my favorite book, The E-Myth. It talks about systems to create businesses. So that would, I'd say that my favorite book. Yeah.
Great. And what's your favorite travel destination?
I have so many. Favorite destination. It's really hard to pin down a favorite destination. I've actually not explored Vietnam. I don't know it very much, and I love to explore more. So I probably have to say it's probably Vietnam as a country because there's so much to explore for me.
Yes. Okay, cool. And if you could have dinner with anyone, who would that be?
If I could have dinner with anyone, I would say Richard Branson.
And what's the most unusual food that you have tried? Oh, where? In Australia?
Yes, yeah, I had alligator pizza, tasty chicken.
Okay, okay. And if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Be able to forecast what's going to happen, look through my crystal ball.
Okay, okay. And what's the best advice that you've ever received?
Keep giving.
Well, Chrystie, thank you so much for being candid and sharing your life and what you're looking at in the next phase of your spiritual awakening. I've enjoyed our chat.